So hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Tristan, for speaking today. It's great to have you here. So
Thank you very much.
No problem. So Tristan Matheson is a young professional who is interested in diversity and inclusion within various business sectors and working environments. He has completed 2 master's degrees in communications and media studies in educational technology at Concordia University in Montreal. His former job as diversity and development specialist at Air Canada gave him experience in improving inclusivity in corporate culture through mixed methods and analyzing data to increase external and internal involvement and reputation. Tristan uses a holistic approach that encourages cross-departmental initiatives which help propel improved employee engagement, educational experiences, and exposure to communities. Thanks again for speaking today, Tristan, and good luck with your presentation.
Well, thank you very much for having me. As I said to Alex, I'll be shutting off my camera so you don't see me. You'll just be seeing the PowerPoint. I think it's so you guys can pay attention. That doesn't mean, by the way, that I'm going to try and engage with you guys in other various ways, but hopefully you can just follow along with the PowerPoint and don't see me, so that's fine. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm going to minimize this a little bit so I can see what's happening. Okay, so gender in the workplace, the hidden minority. So gender in the workplace and the hidden minority. The first off, I was asked for a topic for this conversation, right? And I was like, oh, what do I put? A lot of my career back in my former position at Air Canada was gender. One of my mandates was the Gender X policy. But I wanted to put gender as the hidden minority for a specific reason. And I'm gonna start with a once upon a time story. Okay. So in my former position, we got an award for diversity, and I was asked to select a couple of my colleagues, which I did, and we went to the event and picked up the award, and the people that I went with, 3 of them were from various minorities, not like just different minorities. And like most companies, you have an internal Facebook, right? And you can talk and send messages and start discussions in various facets and areas of the company, right? And one of the conversations that came up post-event was that nobody was there of a visible minority. But they were wrong. There was a woman there. And, being in the corporate culture, the first thing I really noticed was there's not a lot of women. So gender is a minority, whether it's visible or non-visible. And this presentation would be more about non-visible gender minorities, but female in business, especially in certain sectors in business, is very much a minority. So I'd like to discuss this. So this is what I'll be talking about today. Okay, so the agenda. So we're going to go over quickly first a little bit about gender, its variances, terminology, just like a short one-on-one session, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about Gender X, what it means when it was introduced, how it will impact the business, the ecosystem, so our culture, not just HR in its form, but the sum of all the parts, right? Some of the challenges that a business or an organization or institute might face in considering Gender X is now legal on passports and identification, and then of course recommendations. And feel free to discuss parallelly beside in the chat box. I really encourage it. Don't just listen. If you want to say something or if you have a comment or question, just have at it. So, all right. So before we fly into things about gender specific to business, as I said, I want to talk a little bit about the terminology. So if we think about gender as a concept, maybe you could, if you could possibly just put any concept in the chat box. So you'll see the chat box on the right there. Just put anything that comes to mind relating to gender. There's no wrong answers. Anything at all. Anything related to gender that comes into your head. Don't be shy. Anything at all. Male, female. Okay. Identity. Okay. Good. There's absolutely no wrong answer. So just think of anything that first pops in your head. Okay, so gender in its form, right? So there's actually three categories. There's three categories of gender if we think about gender. So the first category that we can think about is the biological, right? How we are or what we are when we're born, okay? And there's several different variances of that. Some are less recognized than others. Obviously, male, female, that's an automatic, right? It's very much in the media. It's very much omnipresent in society, and it has been for a long time, right? But biologically now, there's also other variances of gender, such as intersex, right? Intersex is one. And also, and I'm going to put this in this category, is transgender. So people who are biologically made maybe on the outer membrane, but internally they might be a variance of that outer membrane, right? So whether it be hormones, and I'm talking from a personal experience because I am an open trans man, but biologically there's very different forms of gender than just male and female, but male and female are definitely a prominent for biology, right? So then we have the second category, which is gender identity, right? So gender identity, how the individual identifies. It could be external to how other people identify you in the gender, but gender identity is really dealing with how one identifies with themselves, as themselves. So do I identify or prescribe to male or female, or now gender X? Now that it was introduced as of June of 2019, you'll see gender X on passports, right? So, so how do I like to be addressed? So pronouns, right? Prefixes, Mr., Mrs. How do I identify in society? Okay, and then the next one is gender expression. So gender expression, how we dress, how we express ourselves, how others view us, how we view ourselves, what kind of mannerisms do we have? That's when the whole, masculinity and femininity, which is very binary. And then, of course, you have the more androgynous, expressions that people might show or express, right? Now, these last two, identity and expression, are now legally protected under legislation for gender identity and gender expression. So people are protected legally under the legislation for their gender identity and gender expression. Okay, that's important to know. Okay, so now let's take maybe a little bit more of a granular approach or examples of gender, right? Okay, so we're thinking about gender and biology, right? So we're thinking of cells, how we are born. Okay. How we're conceived, okay, so that's one. That's pretty simple, right? Gender identity. So let's see some of these examples, right? So we're talking about physical ID. Now, in a business, you have a lot of physical ID, from applying to a job to being addressed in communication within the workplace, right? To even driving, on an everyday basis. You have a license, right? You have a physical ID. And some of these physical IDs, you'll find that gender is a part of. For example, in Quebec, the health card has a certain digit that deciphers whether you're male or female, right? So gender identity is very prominent in physical ID, and it's very prominent in business, and it's slowly shifting. As I said, of June of 2019, it's slowly shifting to open it up for more gender neutral or non-binary gender, so gender X, right? Okay, another form of gender identity that is often seen in digital systems, so administration, programs, right? When you enter information in a business, you often collect the information, and one of the informations that you some of the information that you collect is their gender, right? The third is semiotics. Semiotics you see everywhere in public, right? Maybe you guys can give me a really, really easy, very an easy symbol that you quite often see in business, in public spaces, everywhere. Maybe you can give me kind of like an idea of like an example of that. It's quite prominent in malls, everywhere. Semiotics, so sign symbols. So So bathrooms, right? Bathrooms, you see, yes, washrooms, right? And washrooms are kind of a, washrooms, you see they're male, female. Now they're starting to become more prominent where it's just a bathroom or a restroom and non-gendered, period, like no genders. There are examples of that popping up, and that's kind of a slow cultural change you see. But definitely in public space, and actually that's the last place in public change rooms. Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Change rooms or dressing rooms and gyms, right, too. Absolutely. But that's one of the last spaces where gender is segregated in a public space. Okay. And that's not including, of course, certain religious cultures, but specific to public space, public domain. Okay. Now let's go into gender expression. So how we express ourselves, right? Obviously symbiotics. We see, in media, there's certain definitions of masculinity and femininity, right? What it is to be more female, what it is to be male, and now what it is to be androgynous, right? And it's not just in fashion; it's in signs, as you see semiotics, right? It's in various forms, right? So you have it kind of links back to the identity. Then you have it in the media, right? As I said, media, entertainment. So gender expression, a good example of this would be, say, a drag queen, right? A person who, and I say a person because it doesn't necessarily mean it's a man dressing up as a woman, acting as a woman, and entertaining as a woman, right? I don't know if any of you see RuPaul, but the last season of RuPaul, which is a drag queen show, okay, one of the contestants is a female to male, so F to M. So converted to female to male and is now a drag queen. And it performs as a drag queen, but identifies as F to M. So you can see how gender expression does not necessarily automatically reflect somebody's identity, but it's a variant, right? It's different, right? So that's the second example. The other one is fashion. As I kind of talked about in symbiotics, you see it a lot in fashion, what a female and what a male dresses like, androgynous, of course, from hairstyle to clothing to variances such as that. Okay, so that's another example. So now I like to get into gender X and why I'm specifically focusing on gender X, although some of the information that I'm giving you can be adapted to other minorities, but gender X specifically. So what is gender X and where is it recognized? So gender X was introduced by the Canadian government as kind of a non-binary identifier. So somebody who basically doesn't prescribe to either male or female. All right. So somewhere either the person is agender, which means they don't prescribe to any gender, right? Or is gender fluid or gender queer. You'll see that terminology sometimes, but gender neutral. Okay. That's what gender X is. Now, if you're talking from a business standpoint, some businesses are international. So it's always good to see where it is globally, where it's residing. And these are some of the countries and states where gender X is now popping up. Okay, and I say gender X/U because U is the identifier internationally. Some countries use U instead of X. Canada, we use X. As I said, some countries use U. So in business, since, and with the connectivity, since we're not necessarily centralized in Canada and we could be across, it's really good to be aware of what countries recognize this, right? So keep that in mind. So let's look at the ecosystem. Let's look at the ecosystem. We're part of HR, right? A majority of us in this HR, and I'm assuming. Okay, it's maybe not true, but a majority of us are say in HR, right? Okay, so HR, what our job is, we're like the pulse. We try and make sure our culture is running smoothly. Our policies are set in place. Everything is is honky dory that way. But if we're thinking about the brand, and this is coming from kind of more of a holistic approach, right? If we're thinking about the brand, which we're trying to uphold and make sure that it's pristine, then we're thinking about various things. Like, for instance, a bank, right? You think of like the brand. You think of the signs, the symbols, the products, right? You want to make sure that that is connected. That is recognized. You always make sure that the brand is basically in alignment with the culture, right? I think it's very important what you produce outside, what you vocalize outside of the brand. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more on the next slide, but what you vocalize outside the brand is directly impacts the brand and the culture inside. Okay. So, so culture, I'm giving an example of culture. So say you're in a hospital. You have colleagues like doctors. Say you're in an airport, you think of the culture, you're thinking about baggage, you're thinking about pilots, you're thinking about flight attendants, you're thinking about various parts in the company. It's the culture, right? As a consumer, as a client, as a consumer, as an external, that's what you also think of. You think of airports, right? You think of the brand. You think of the airports. You think of the cargo, you think of the various sections of the airport. So the personnel that you deal with, right? And then the ecosystem of the process. So the systems, you have IT, you have tons of systems, not just internally within different departments, but you're talking about systems externally as well. So partnerships. For instance, I'll give you an example. Say you're a person working in an IT firm, or say you're a person in investments, and they offer their employees benefits. Well, those benefits are linked to a company that they partner with, and those benefits have information and systems that translate and transfer information from your system to their system, right? So it's not just all internally, it's also externally. So this is the ecosystem. We have to be very aware of the connectivity of these three things, okay? So now I'm going to be talking a little bit about, I'm going to get a little bit more granular again of gender and business in the business environment, okay? And these 3 points are very important, not just to keep in mind, but also good for business cases. So when you're talking to leaders, when you're talking to executives, when you're talking to anybody, in the top echelons of the company, this is how basically what you're doing and how you're implementing and changing the culture, and the culture is kind of making it more inclusive, how it can affect the business. Okay, so gender and business in the environment, right? So reputation and comfortability. If you have an inclusive place that openly and publicly talks about what they stand for, right? For instance, the Bell. Let's talk, right? That's a campaign that they went very public externally. What do you think that does to the culture? How does it positively impact the culture? How can inclusivity and people feeling safe, feeling like they can talk, what does that do? Well, attrition rates, it can affect attrition rates. What does attrition rates mean? That means if people leave the company because they're not feeling respected or feel like they're being valued, they'll just leave. What does that do? That makes you have to hire somebody else and train. Training costs a lot of money, right? Talent, it minimizes your talent pool, right? So with minimizing your talent pool, it brings less talent into your company, which leads to less innovative solutions, possibly less innovative ways in which to do things, right? And productivity. Productivity is a big one. If people don't leave their job because they're feeling uncomfortable or they don't feel safe, and you have a room of colleagues there internally who aren't getting along because they don't feel like they're being respected or acknowledged, you're going to have less productivity. And if you're talking about those 3 things, that's not just a linker to the culture and making positive impacts. That's a linker to how successful the business will be, right? And how sustainable the business will be. Okay. Another one that I actually didn't mention on here, and I should, is I don't know if you guys are aware, I'm sure you are, is this CSR, corporate social responsibility. And that's becoming more and more and more and more important in today's society. So it's not just about what you're doing, but externally again, right? Investors. So partnerships, you know, some companies won't want to align with you if you're not conducting or trying to make or improve your culture in an inclusive way. Okay. Now I'm going to get back to a little bit more of the gender X, because this is more kind of linked to this. So communication and language. How do you address the customer? How do you address your colleagues, right? In a respectful way. So an example of this, I have two examples. One is, you'll see now more than ever, people are including their pronouns on LinkedIn or even on their email. Sometimes sign-offs now in businesses, you'll have that preferred, like in brackets, male, he, him, or female, she, her, or even, they, right? Which is the gender neutral. So you'll see that more often. Communication externally, let's look externally. What does it do? How do you communicate to your external clients how you feel, right? So think of, and this was one of my initiatives actually, in kind of collaboration with obviously the diversity team and some of the marketing team, is just addressing your customers. So like on airplanes, Madame, Monsieur, instead of having ladies and gentlemen, why not just say hello everyone or bonjour à tous, right? Right. So just that little change, communication can make, it might be a small change, but it's a huge impact, right? Because suddenly it opens for more inclusivity, right? And administration. So identification options, system integration. You know, in a world of trying to apply for jobs, you know, it's really interesting, the vetting process that some companies have and the inconsistencies of that. Sometimes they ask for certain identifiers. Obviously, it's all voluntary to see if you're a part of a minority, but it's quite interesting, and it tells a little bit about the company without even speaking, right? I'll give you an example of a personal narrative that I had with a bank. I'm not going to specify the bank, but a personal narrative of mine, and it's because I'm trans, and it was during my transition when I was taking hormone replacement therapy, my voice dropped, right? And when you call into a bank and you're verifying certain things, they're going to ask for your identification, right? They're going to ask for your identification. So I started talking, and they said, "Whoa, wait. You go by Tristan?" I'm like, "Well, no, my previous name was Gwyneth." They're like, "But you don't sound like a Gwyneth." So how does that? How can we use technology or ways in which to avoid the pushing of coming out or having to explain making customers explain their narrative over and over again? Okay. So that's okay. So let's look at the challenges. I'm going to try and wrap this up because I really want questions. And I hope you have a lot of questions. I really love questions and knowledge sharing, and I think that's important. So challenges for gender in business in Canada, okay? Provinces for identification specific to gender X, there's a variance. Some provinces are doing it very differently. Last I read, BC on their license, they were playing around with not having gender at all. Okay, so there's a variance of process in different provinces. I think there needs to be consistency. I think there needs to be leadership and consistency across the whole country for a more, so it's easier. It's easier for business too, you know. And there's kind of we know the process. The process is easier, and it's not just provincial. Language is a big hurdle. Language was something that I in my former job really struggled with, specific to gender X. And the reason why is, as Canada, we're a bilingual country, French and English, and the French language is very genderized. So like it's very gender based, right? Unlike our English, right? But there are many languages in the globe that are just like French, like Spanish, right? So what do? How do we standardize and the language, and who does that, right? That's a challenge. Digital systems, okay? As I was explaining to you and giving examples, it's not just your internal departments that are working with different digital systems and information and identification, right? You're talking about information transfer. And in the age of technology and networking and connectivity, that can be a problem, right? And then, of course, your global acceptance culture. So you're talking about if you're an international company and you're dealing with different countries, they have different laws, right? They have a different culture. So how do you mitigate that, right? To kind of make a very inclusive culture internally within your company. So these are some of the challenges that you may face that I want to highlight. And so my recommendations for this is to really research, evaluate your training, evaluate your tools, evaluate your systems, see where you're connected, who you're connected with. You know, I used to, and I still do go to a lot of conferences. And, you know, I talk to executives in different corporate sectors, and I say, you know, it's not about who gets out the gate first and who is the most progressive company. It's really kind of collaboratively going hand in hand because we're all connected in some sort of way, right? Especially with our systems, right? So it really needs to kind of be all for one kind of thing, right? Governmental updates. Stay informed about those. It's super important, not just about, you know, what's happening with ID provincially, but where it goes, the communication, the language, if they're doing any updates to that, super important. There needs to be consistency. There needs to be consistency within the company. If you make a change, make sure that everybody knows that change is happening. Consistency within the process of that cultural change is super important. You got to look holistically. You can't just look at HR. You have to do cross-departmental conversation, communication strategy. You really have to do that. It's very, very important for a successful output. And then, as I said, think outside the box, right? Don't just think inside your department. Don't just think of other departments, but think what society is, how they're viewing your brand, what they think of your sector of business. You know, you be aware of your external surroundings as well. And that's all I have to say, I think, about that. So thank you very much. And I hope you guys have tons of questions for me. But that's it. Thank you very much for having me. And if you have further questions or you don't want to post them on chat, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Please do. I'd be more than happy to either share my experience, my former position, what I've done, or any personal narratives. It would be more than happy to share with you. So feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Perfect. Thank you.
Tristan, can you hear me okay? Hello?
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Great, and I can hear and see you as well. Awesome. But I just wanted to come on and say thanks for your presentation. It was really interesting and really engaging. And I'm sorry if I missed one of the questions here. I'm not sure if you addressed Robert's question yet, or...
No. You get a moment. Can you please clarify when the slides in terms of self-identifying within a company? Self-identifying within a company. Okay. I think you know, when leaders in the company take initiative and say, okay, you know, if we're having problems or if there's issues with or people are scared about how to address people, Why don't we add them? It's not going to do any harm. So why don't we add our pronouns at the end of our emails? I mean, there's no harm in doing that. Okay. If you're talking about identifying even our colleagues or collecting that identity for specific things within the company or even customers, if it's a form and gender isn't needed or is not a needed information and it's just automatically attached because that's what it always has been, get rid of it. Right? Why is it needed? For instance, I'll give you an example. Okay, I won't use my company, my former company, because there was examples. I'm going to say driver's license. Why do we need to have a gender on driver's license? Mm-hmm. The only linker to gender in driver's licenses, which is really interesting, is the insurance sector, right? Insurance companies, right? Because the premiums are based on gender, right? Mm-hmm. But why do we need to have that identifier on our driver's license? I mean, some things are automatic. Some things, I think, because, there's a form. You have your name, you have your age, you have your birth date, you have your, your address, and just gender is just one of those things that you just put on a form. Mm-hmm. But if it makes the culture and the company, and it's a useless piece of information, why add it? Get rid of it, right? Okay. So that was my suggestion in my former position to various departments. But yes, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, awesome. I don't see any other questions, unfortunately. But yeah, I just wanted to say it was a really great presentation. I really enjoyed it. There's definitely some great points. And I think you mentioned it as I was coming on, but just in case anyone didn't hear it, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. So you should see it on my profile. I put the LinkedIn, my LinkedIn hyperlink in the profile on the Hopin. Yeah, so it should be on my conference profile. Yeah.
Awesome. And just in case anyone doesn't know what Tristan means, so if you just click on his name in the chat, I believe if you scroll up, he's put some messages there. So you can click on that. It will pop up a little menu and it will say his LinkedIn link there. You just click that and there you go. But thanks again, Tristan. It was a really great presentation.
And just thanks for having me. It
was a pleasure. And just to let you know, there is a recording available of your presentation. If you'd like a copy, or if anyone watching would like a copy, certainly let Tristan or myself know and we can provide you with a copy. And as well, just to let everyone know what's going on next at the event. So our next sessions are actually starting in just 1 minute at 2:50. So if you click the sessions tab on the left side, you'll be able to get to that. Thanks again, Tristan. It was great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.